Hey everyone, Jamal here with Review Me, and today we're going to be continuing with the third session of the UK Photography Industry Explained with photography agent and director of her own agency, Jennifer Wren. And today's session is going to be about how to approach and research and find agents. So with that, I'll kick it over to Jen.
Oh, thank you, Jamal. So we're just picking up from where we were before. I don't know, I think we've got everyone from the same seminars before, but if we've got any new people, basically in session one, we talked about the photography industry, a bit of an insight into what people were after. And in session two, we then sort of ran through all the fundamentals of what it is that you need to kind of get in place before you sort of properly push to have an agent and sort of go full throttle. So today we're going to follow on from this and talk about sort of the actual steps of getting an agent and how that can happen, because it can be really simple and straightforward, and you can get a recommendation from one person, they introduce you to the agent, and then you can go from there. But at the same time, it can be really difficult, and it's a bit of a sort of stab in the dark because there are a lot of agents out there, and everyone's sort of matching of personalities. So today what we're going to do is sort of start off with the kind of researching an agent. So what is it that you need to look for? Who do you want? And what's the sort of right match for you in terms of representation? We're then going to talk about approaching agents. So different ways to do this. It's really hard because as I was writing this, I was sort of going, well, this is what I would like, but then I know that sometimes I'll call an art buyer and they'll go, well, why are you calling me? Send me an email. So we'll sort of go through different ways of doing that. We'll then talk about sort of the actual meeting stage. So when you start meeting agents, sort of, I've put it in here as actually like a two-stage thing if you get to the point of that. But and so we'll go through that, and we'll just sort of talk about anything else, which I couldn't think of anything other than to put under other. So I hope that works. So first of all, we'll talk about researching agents. So like everyone on this seminar will be from different places. So some people will already have relationships with agents. From if you've done assisting and you're now sort of going from being an assistant to being a fully fledged photographer, there's a chance that you've already had relationships with agents up until now. But then also that people will be coming to the industry slightly new and not necessarily even know sort of what the right sort of starting point is. One of the best ways to find an agent, I think, is to really ask your peers. So if there's people that you're working with commercially already, maybe talk to them and say, who did they recommend as the sort of best agents to be working with? Also sort of other photographers you might have in terms of the community, set builders, makeup artists, everyone sort of has this sort of idea of an agent, and getting a recommendation for an agent, I think, is probably the best thing you can do, because it gives you an in for when you do start to approach that agent, because you can say, oh, Joe Bloggs introduced me to your agency. But also I sometimes think the people that you're sort of with in terms of your industry and the people that you're sort of socializing with are going to be sort of in the right area of where you want to go as well. So that helps. There are places like Review Me where they have lots of agents on the site that you can sort of look through and look at all the different identities. But also there's places like the Agent List, who I see come through on my Google Analytics. Actually, lots of people look through that and find our agency. Even though we are W and we're right at the bottom of the list, it's still like a really good place to look. So, and then I suppose the last place I would say is, and this actually brings us on to the recognizing house styles, is who other photographers are represented by. So if you've got sort of if you're looking at other photographers and sort of going, well, I like that person's style, or I like how they work or how they're represented, then you can also sort of look and see who's representing them. So recognizing house styles. So once you started to look at different agencies and working out what you sort of warm to, what you like, and where you can see yourself matching, looking at the house styles is going to be really crucial, because in the end you need to fit in terms of your portfolio into their roster. So it's like a puzzle piece. You're sort of going, right, okay, how does that all work out? If you sort of look at it and you sort of like it, and sometimes I get lots of photographers email me, and sometimes they're really right and would fit in terms of my roster, and then sometimes they're so wrong. And actually that's where we come back to sort of looking and seeing how their client base works as well. Because if you're working predominantly with retail clients, and I don't know, like your H&M and your sort of high street fashion places, and that's where you're wanting to push yourself, then if you've got an agent who you're looking at and they have no sort of reach to those places, I would suggest they're maybe the wrong place for you. Not always. Like, sometimes agents will be open to sort of marketing to other areas, but I know that within my agency, I target certain parts of the industry. So I sort of spend more time going to that sort of pocket of client in comparison to another pocket. So you want to make sure that the agent you're with is going in the right direction as you, and sort of going, right, this is how it's going to work. And then reputation of the agency. This is really crucial, but then it can also be misleading, because people will have an idea of what the agency looks like, or have different experiences of working with the agency and that sort of thing. But so it's good, because if you ask around and say, what do you think of this agency and that agency, lots of people say, oh, don't go there, or yeah, you should definitely get in touch with them because they're really great and they're good because of this and that. And so it's always worth asking about it, but not being completely led, because actually I was in an agency this morning, an advertising agency, and they mentioned a fellow agent, and I was really shocked with what they'd said, and I was just like, well, you know, that's your experience, but actually I've had a good experience with them in the past. So yeah, so I think they're the sort of things that you should be looking for when you're researching. And then it really is it's a personality thing as well as a visual thing. So definitely go to who you initially warm to. If you look at a website and you love the website and you love the photographers and you can see your work fitting in really well, there's a chance the other agent will also see the same. So once we've researched agents, then we kind of get to the point of approaching agents. Now there's a few things that I want to talk about here. Is first of all, how to approach the agent, or the sort of different routes of how to do it, but also a few things to be aware of from the agent side, so that you can kind of understand their reaction to your approach. So it's been quite interesting actually, because I knew that I had this talk coming up this week. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been really looking at how photographers have got in touch with me, and seeing how I reacted to them, and who I sort of spent more time looking at, and people who I probably are still in my inbox and haven't answered. So sorry, let me just take a glass of water. I've got a sore throat today. So let's talk about the strategies. So the different ways in which you can get in touch with an agent. It's not too dissimilar to if you were trying to get commercial work and sort of approach editorials or commercials, and it's a really similar thing in terms of just trying to reach out to people in the right way. I get people send me sort of really structured newsletters where they've used like a MailChimp service or something like that, where it's designed and they've got their work and sort of an insight into what they've been doing over the last couple of months. I then also get phone calls from people, which is great. Emails, sort of getting in touch with the very sort of standard, I'm looking for representation, would you have a look at my work? Referrals, like I was talking about earlier, if someone gets in touch with me and they have been recommended by somebody I know, the chances of me seeing them are much higher than someone that I don't know. And that, I was thinking about this, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. But I think in terms of if someone you know knows that agent, then definitely mention it, because the chance of them, that agent giving you time is higher. And then social media, we have a lot of people connect with us on social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I would say try to avoid, like, it's fine to follow the agencies and have an awareness and that sort of thing, but don't rely on social media for that contact, because in the end there's lots of people. So I think we're at about 700 people on our Instagram at the moment, which isn't huge, but I know a good 50% of that are photographers. So I haven't looked through 300 photographers' websites from them following me on social media. So it's definitely sort of worth doing, but you know that you need to get in touch with people in the other way. So what I thought I would talk to you about is what I really like and what I found being most interesting this last couple of weeks, when I was sort of paying more attention to the idea of photographers getting in touch and what's most successful. I think I've got a small roster of 5 photographers, and only one of those photographers did I meet completely organically, in terms of they got in touch with me and said, I like your website and I like the agency, and would you meet me? And that sort of, I was thinking about this and whether I thought that was a good thing or not, I'm not sure. But what I've noticed is that I actually do really appreciate newsletters from photographers, because it gives me a real time to sort of digest their work. So when they send me the first one, you sort of get a really quick look at it, and then it's probably deleted and gone out of the inbox. Then when the second one comes through, you've got sort of new work a few months on, and it always makes me realise that that person, I'm like, oh, actually I've seen that person's work before, and that, I think that's been quite an interesting thing for me, because I've gone, actually I really enjoy the newsletter side of it, which I probably wouldn't have said initially. And then one thing that I really don't like is if a photographer calls me out of the blue without an email or anything like that, because I want them to call me, but I want to know who they are first. So if someone sent me an email and like the week before, 2 days before, and then they call me and say, hi, I sent you an email, I just wondered whether you'd seen it. I actually like that. For me, it's the best way to work it, because in the end I've probably had a really quick look. If not, then I can get a look on the, like, I can pull it up on my email really quickly whilst the person's on the phone, and you can then have a really nice conversation in terms of, if I immediately think it's interesting, then I might say to the person, okay, well, I think it's interesting, let me have a proper look through the work again, and then we can make a date to meet up. Or if they're really not going to be right for the agency, then I would rather say there and then on the phone and just say, you know, it's just not right for what we're looking for at the moment. So thank you for getting in touch. The reason I say cool is because I do actually go through my emails and reply to people, but I know that there's some people that I'm still missing on my list who have emailed me that I haven't got back to yet. So I would always say don't be too offended if you email an agent and they haven't got back to you straight away. So I think in terms of a really practical kind of how to approach someone, it seems a bit ABC, but I think that would be that sort of, that structure of at least an email followed by a phone call is definitely good. And I always think I'm quite happy when photographers call, because I feel like there's a huge amount of effort that that goes into it, rather than just relying on email. But then I'm a real phone call person, not an email person, so that's why I'd say that way. And actually, there was a few things I was going to say about when you do approach an agent, in terms of whether they sort of go to the meeting stage with you or not. One thing is that your time is really, when you're running a small business, which most agencies are, your time is really crucial. And actually, I suppose what I was going to say was that when you commit to meeting a photographer, you're sort of taking an hour out of your day to see them, which doesn't seem like much, but when you get a lot of photographers email you all the time, you physically can't see everyone. So if you don't get a meeting with an agent, I would say don't be offended, because the chances are that it's not right for them, or they haven't got space on their roster at the moment. Because that's really key for me. What I look at is I go, okay, at the moment I've got this amount of photographers, this is how much manpower I've got, and can I allocate to any more? So before I even consider looking at more photographers or meeting more photographers, I'm always sort of going, can I actually allocate the right amount of time to that person to represent them in the way that I want to represent them? Because otherwise you can end up on a roster just as a number and not actually get the service that you want or would expect from your agent. So one, don't be offended if people don't get back to you, just maybe keep trying. And if you never hear from them, then it was just never going to be right in the first place. If they can't meet you, or I get so many photographers who say, oh yes, that agent said that they're not looking to represent anyone at the moment, and they get really annoyed about it, and I'm like, well, either that's their way of saying it's not right for me, or they really aren't looking to represent anyone new at the moment. So just sort of bear with the agents, I think, in that sense. And then just lastly on that, so I'm looking at my notes as well, is when you go into an agent and photographer relationship, it's a real big commitment from both sides. So the photographer will be putting a lot of time into getting everything ready, but the agent will be too. And I always think there's probably, for me, there's about 6 months worth of work really getting to the point of being happy with how I'm presenting the photographer. So that again is another reason why it's sometimes hard to pin people down. So once you've got to the point of having a meeting with an agent, again, these are really simple things, but I just thought we'd go through them quickly in case anyone had any questions or hesitations about what would be expected. You should always take your portfolio. I had a meeting once where a photographer turned up without his portfolio, and it just makes it really difficult, because in the end, it's about meeting the person and seeing whether your personalities get on, but at the same time, it's about your work as well, and whether that work is going to fit into the agency, and the agent's take on your work, how they're going to market it, or would think to market it, and sort of any kind of feedback that they have specifically on the work. Because I've met photographers where I look at their portfolio and we will look at the work and go, okay, well, it's fantastic, but why don't you try doing this, this, and this, and then come back to me in 3 months' time? And and that happens quite often. And then you sort of just start a kind of working relationship. And once you sort of worked for maybe 3 months together, sort of just bouncing the portfolio back and forwards, you can then kind of go, right, okay, actually I'm going to work with this person or not work with them. So take a portfolio. If you have a printed portfolio, that's great. If you don't, take your iPad portfolio. But if you've only got a digital portfolio, always take at least one print, if not several. Because I find it really hard to judge work on an iPad. And actually, work often looks a lot better on an iPad than it does printed. So I want to know that the photographers that I'm working with are their work prints well too, because a lot of the time the posters that we're shooting and the campaigns and that sort of thing are going to be printed. So that's sort of the way that we need to see it. Do your research on the agent before you go in. Again, that's a really straightforward thing. A lot of the time the agent might be giving you half an hour or an hour. So the more you know before you step in the door, then the more you're going to get out of the meeting. Listen, I put listen down, and I hope that doesn't seem sort of any kind of condescending, but it's really hard when you go into a meeting, especially when you're sort of in this sort of feedback situation. And I think just sort of really taking on board what they're saying and trying to get the most out of that time as you can, I think is really good. And in terms of feedback, definitely ask people. If you're up for having really, really honest feedback, then ask for it. I actually often say to people, do you want me to be very honest? Because I wouldn't want to just sort of go completely full in and tell people exactly what I think unless they really, really want that. Otherwise, people will walk away from the meeting and go, oh, well, she said X, Y, and Z, and she really didn't need to, or something like that. So, so if you feel like you're just getting a lot of, oh yeah, this works nice, this works nice, this works nice, then maybe just say, well, I know you said it's nice, but what would you give to me to make it different? Be honest in return, really simple again. I think in the end, the sort of honesty and the listening, the first meeting could be the meeting that then leads to a really fruitful relationship with your agent or your future agent. So the more upfront you can be, the better, because that's the best way to start this kind of relationship. It's a really intense relationship between a photographer and an agent, because you basically going into a business partnership. So you want to get that started on the right foot. And then in my last point, when I was writing this, I thought, actually, I don't mean leave knowing whether they're going to commit to you or not. It's more just having a sense of, is this meeting going to go anywhere further? Because if you leave and you really have no clue what the meeting sort of ended up, then you're back into the sort of chicken and egg kind of thing of, do I call them? Do I email them? That sort of thing. So if you, it's a really simple kind of, be it like being upfront with the agent and saying, okay, great, thanks for your time. What do you think? Is it something that you would consider for your roster? Or have you got any space on your roster at the moment? And just because if it's a really simple thing, but at least you then leave knowing where you stand with that person. And then in terms of once you've come out of that meeting, like I would really consider all the different elements that happened when you went in terms of what you thought of the person, whether you met it depends what sort of size agency you're going into. If you're going into an agency where it's a sort of small company, you're probably meeting the agent directly. But if you're going into something bigger, you might have met the agent, but then there's directors above them. And I think really sort of taking a bit of a vibe from the office and the person and seeing whether you thought that was something that you felt like you could be part of moving forward. I think first instincts are really good in that situation. So that's sort of meeting one, and I've broken them down as two different meetings. So meeting one is the initial meeting, and actually I see that as the agent's meeting in one respect. So the agent is meeting the photographer, and they can create space in their business for that person or not following that first meeting. Now the second meeting is your meeting. It's really going, right, okay, now that I know the agent is interested in me, I need to make sure that I'm interested in that agent as well. Because whether you've been represented before or not, because I'm aware that some people on the call might already had representation or now looking for a new agent, or maybe it is just your first agent. Don't rush, because actually I was talking about a photographer earlier, and she's sort of known in London as someone that people are interested in, and she's had quite a few offers of representation. And I met her and said, yeah, you could be represented tomorrow by some really good people, but actually you're quite young and you're still establishing your look and feel. So if you don't need to have an agent right now, then maybe spend some time really developing yourself for the next year before you go into sort of an agent relationship, so that you can work out who the best person is going to be. And that's a bit unusual, and I'm sure the other agents who have offered her representation might not agree with me, but I sort of thought that you really have to suss out who it is that you want to be represented by. So once you've got a bit of a commitment from the agent, as in they've said, yeah, we're interested in meeting you, then you need to really suss them out and go through all the different things. So in terms of points, I brought this up in terms of like what I would be looking for if I was a photographer. But the first thing to say, I suppose, is really working out what it is that you want from your agent. When I was setting up Wren, and I'm sure I've told you this before, but when I was setting up Wren, I said to the photographers that I met, like, I know I've been an agent for years, I've now been an art buyer, and I know what it is to want a photographer as an agent, what it is to want a photographer as an art buyer, but I've not been a photographer. So what is it that you want from me? Because I don't know that other side of the relationship. And I think it was really crucial. And actually my photographers bring it up quite often and say, hey, yeah, it was really important when you said that to us, because it really got us thinking about what it was that we wanted to get from you, other than the financial arrangement of like an agent getting a photographer work. And it's helped me with my photographers moving forward. So we'll do different reviews and sort of development work together. And then I'll go, oh God, yeah, that photographer says that he wants to go for a beer. So let's make sure that we go to the pub to do this development work rather than sit in an office, and sort of do all these different things. So I think definitely try and think about what your overall thing is that you want from your agent. So just going through a few things that are sort of pointers for when you're in your, I say second meeting, it could be your fourth meeting, but just a few things to consider. What's the agent's initial thoughts on direction for pitching you? The reason I put this is because you need to make sure that you're thinking the same as what the agent is thinking. Not the same, because the agent would, I suppose they bring a different idea and you can bring a different idea to them too. But you want to make sure that when they're saying, oh yeah, we want to pitch you towards luxury brands, that that's actually what you're interested in, and that you don't go, oh, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I only want to do charity work. Or, you know, it's sort of going, well, make sure that you are excited by where they want to push you. And then this leads into the artist development. So I hear from more and more photographers that they don't get a huge amount of support from their agents in terms of the artist development. And that just comes down to different agenting styles. So if artist development is important to you, then make sure that that's something that's in place within that agency. If you're really not fussed about someone working through and sort of supporting you, developing your work and pushing you further, and it's just the financial stuff that you're interested in, then go for a sort of more sales heavy agent, in terms of that they just sort of book you rather than develop you. Then I'm sure lots of agents would look at my next point and go, what? But it's, what are your ambitions for the agency? The reason I put this is because there's quite a few agents like myself who are starting up new companies, and I just think that it is quite important to know what that agent is thinking in terms of the future development of the business, because you want to be excited by that too, because that would be something that you're part of. So if they say, oh yeah, we're going to stay as a really small company with 5 photographers and that's what we're going to be, then you want to know that you're happy being part of that. Or if they say, oh yeah, but we're actually only 5 photographers at the moment, but we're going to be 50 in 6 months' time, you also don't want to get involved in something if you don't think that that's the right thing. So they're just a sort of general kind of pointer in making sure that you're in the right place, or sort of thinking the right things, thinking the same things as the agent, or excited by what they're thinking for you. Then there's the financial stuff. So this can just be a really simple conversation to begin with, just sort of, oh, how does the financial split work? In the UK, it's a 25%, 75% fee split, and then there's different splits when you get into sort of production profit or markup and that sort of thing. But I often get people say to me, oh, do you do it the same as what everyone else does? Because that's quite important to establish early on as well, because if you're talking to someone and then they go, oh yeah, we're only going to give you 5%, and I've never come across that, but if they did say that, then you probably want to step away and back off quite quickly. And then the fee that they put the photographer out at, they might not necessarily know at an early stage what fee to sort of put you forward as. In London, like a new photographer would go probably out at about £2,500 to £3,000 per day for a commercial thing, and an established photographer can be between £10,000 and £20,000 a day in terms of fees. Now, if you're in your mind, you're thinking that you want to be on £10,000 a day, well, we all want to be on £10,000 a day, but if you're thinking that that's where your fee needs to be put out at, and then your agent turns around and goes, oh no, I thought that we would put you out at £3,000 a day. Again, that's just a sort of understanding between you and the agent in terms of your level within the industry starting out. And then in terms of the last point here, what is the agency expect from you as a photographer? So everyone has different things that they want from their photographer, and that can be from like a new piece of work every month, or a new piece of work every week, or for the photographer to be involved in looking at the budgets, or creating treatments and that sort of thing. I think just talking that through with the agency, sort of saying what are their expectations from them of you, sort of what is it that they want you to be involved in, and because that just sort of is a really good starting point for how you then work as a team together. And just because, like, I can remember taking on one of my photographers and saying to him, oh yeah, we've got this job in, can you just do the treatment and send it to me, and I'll put it all together in a presentation and send it off to the client. And he turned around and went, well, what do you mean? Because my old agent always wrote all of my treatments for me. And I was like, oh, well, that's all in good, but we do it together. Like in my agency, we do everything together. So we look at it together, and the photographer tends to do the writing, and then I'll tweak it and make it better and before we send it off to the client, because it really is a team kind of effort in terms of pitching stuff. And that photographer was totally up for it. But I think any of those conversations you can have before you get to the point of getting to something that you weren't expecting is always going to be better. So I would really sort of consider that when you're talking to agents. And in terms of like numbers of meetings and that sort of thing, like I've had photographers that I could have met up to 10 times before I've committed to representing them. Or I think maybe the one photographer I met only via Skype, but we probably had a good 4 or 5 Skype calls before we said, okay, yeah, let's work together. So I would say don't rush into committing to an agent. You can always, I always think if an agent's really committed to you, then they would wait. If you had said, okay, we want to meet a few more people before we make our decision, or that sort of thing. So really take your time. I would say meet as many agents as you can. I wouldn't say go crazy, but you can then compare all the different situations and say, okay, I like this agent because of this, but actually the other agent brings something else to the table, and then you can sort of you have a bit more of an educated kind of decision then, because you can say, well, actually, I really want to go with this, rather than just going into one place and hearing their story as to sort of how they would represent you. So I think just finally, a few other considerations on that really is contracts with agents. That's probably something I could have included in that last slide in terms of your understanding. So we will go into this next week with sort of just watch outs on some of those things. But if you feel more comfortable with having a contract, then make sure that the agent is happy to give you one. In London, there's actually quite a lot of the artist contracts are actually just verbal, and it's sort of done by a gentleman's agreement. So if you're happy with that, then go with that. But if you would prefer a contract, like, just make sure that you say that to the agent that you're discussing it with. Then beware financial implications. This sounds scary, but I suppose what I mean is that once I've signed a photographer to rent, I need at least one portfolio. I'd like 2 portfolios if I can have them, but I need one. We then also sort of do yearly marketing pieces that the photographers contribute to, which we try and keep as sort of sensible financially, but we also do really lovely things. So I have to sort of say to the photographers, okay, that's going to come to an X amount of money, which they have to contribute to. Some agents charge for couriers and sort of monthly expenses. So I would again just maybe bring that up with the people that you're talking to and say sort of what is it that you'd need from me straight away. And then just lastly, once you've committed to an agent, that is just the beginning. So this comes to the sort of 6-month time period I was talking to you about earlier in terms of getting everything ready. I spend a lot of time with my photographers really fine-tuning how we're going to put their work out to the industry in terms of the portfolio and what's going to be seen and how everyone's going to sort of understand their work. And so that can take at least a month sometimes of backwards and forwards between me and the photographer. And then it's all the other bits, so the development, the biography, the marketing. So if you're signing to an agent, just be aware of that, because it's not an immediate thing. And even once you've gone on the website and then they're starting to take the portfolio out as well, I've been lucky enough that I can remember taking on an illustrator at a previous company I worked with, and we made a lot of money from them, and they made a lot of money within the first 6 months of us representing them. That was a real fluke. So once you are represented, don't expect things to turn around like immediately. The first thing is you have to, as an agent, you have to identify that person in the industry. Once people have started remembering them, then you hope the campaigns come in, and then you have to win the campaigns. So I would say that you're looking for, like, in terms of your first commission, it could be from 6 months up to 18 months or even longer after that. So it is a real long game. So, well, photography is a long game, and I'm sure I said it before. You have to be really committed and sort of be up for being part of that. So I think that's everything in terms of what I was planning on talking to you about today, but I know that we always do like a short questions and answers at the end. So if anyone's got anything specific, I'm going to hand over to Jamal. We can't hear you at the moment.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty good. It definitely covered everything. I think this particular session, more people will be joining in after the fact, but that was definitely very detailed. And I think that's a good send-off for the next session, which I think what we can do is the last session is just really focused on contracts. Maybe half the time we'll focus on those contracts, and the other half will just be a Q&A about any particular thing from any of the prior sessions.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because we don't want to spend too much time on contracts. They're kind of boring. So we'll do that.
Cool. So, Jennifer, I think this was a great session. I don't think there's any particular question for me, or nobody posted any. So I think this was very detailed. So yeah, for the final session, which is going to be June 28th, I think, or 30th, I can't remember. Wait, I can look at it right now. June 28th. We'll do, that's going to focus on contracts, and then also kind of Q&A about the previous three sessions. So it'll mainly be a Q&A to kind of wrap up everything that was talked about over these last 3 sessions.
Okay, sounds good to me. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll.
All right, thank you everybody, and tune in for the next session.